'cause we resonate. Resonate, you can't escape. Resonate, 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 you can't escape. Do you see a demon? Do you see Satan? Well, go a little bit deeper inside, and the other side is you. Resonate, 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 we can't escape. Resonate, 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 you can't escape.
How do you like that? So here we are. This is the Tuesday, January 20th Solutio live stream. I'm Colin Davis. The websites are shadowtechalchemy.com, soluciopodcast.com, melissamarimovie.com. And today we're going to talk about alchemical relationships. That's kind of be the big subject matter for today. And I got some notes all about that. And what you just saw there, that was some of Melissa used to do these Facebook Live is what it is, Facebook Live broadcasts, because it took us years to get our project, the O1 experience, together. And so there was a lot of time that we weren't out there performing, and so Melissa just had to constantly perform, and so she would do these Facebook Lives, and I have so many of those recorded. I probably have lost some because she had a Facebook page that was taken down, so I probably have lost some of those, but I still have a whole bunch of them, just a ton of them. And that was one of her mini improvs, and she would just she would create the music, in the computer, in the iPad usually, and it'd just be some simple song like that, and then she would just write a couple lyrics to like, what is the song about, and then she would just improvise. So it's all improvisation. And in that song actually applies to what we're going to be talking about today, because she's talking about the resonant field of relationship and how the shadow complexes within us resonate together and then pull each other into conflict. And so she says, what does she say in there? Do I what am I, a demon? Do you think I'm a demon? Am I Satan? And the way she does it is so theatrical and great. And it's just there to shake you up and scare you and stuff. She was really good at that. But and so that's what we've been talking about today. And as usual, I'm gonna just mention a few things about what this show is about, and encourage you. Probably most people that will see this after the fact. And so I just want to let you guys know that you're really welcome to join the streams, to join, to comment while I'm live, and even to call in. I got phone numbers. You can call in through WhatsApp. You can call in through my Google Voice number, and you can go to soluciopodcast.com and all the information's there, or just look in the YouTube description. The call-in numbers are there, and I welcome you guys to call in. That's what really makes it. Because, I can work on comments too. Comments is fine also. Either way you want to do it. But the best way to convey information about what we talk about here, which is inner alchemy, it's working on yourself, maturing yourself, healing yourself, developing yourself, whatever terms that you want to use. Even a term like enlightenment, the path to enlightenment, that's what we're on. That's what we're doing here. And so the best way to really convey this kind of information is through conversations, and is through answering questions and talking to people. And so I'm good with lecturing, but the best way is for you guys to be involved. So a lot of people, this is a pretty rarefied kind of subject matter. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be rarefied. This should be, doing this kind of work on yourself and having deep alchemical relationships. This should be incredibly popular. This should just be the way people do things. But we're just not. It's not where we are right now in civilization, and so so this is going to be a small percentage of people that are going to be into this or even able to do this. But so I understand that anyone that might find this might not know a whole lot of other people who are doing this or as serious about it as I am or as they are. But you may know one person. And if you know one person, then all you have to do is just send them the link to the podcast or my website or whatever and just say, hey, I think you might resonate with this. Check it out. That's it. If you can just do that, that will really do a lot, because I'm just here. I've told this story before and I'll keep telling this story, that Melissa and I, we had 12 years together, and we didn't really have to go outside of our relationship, outside of our little private life that we had together. We did. We wrote books, we put bands on stage, we did workshops, we did all kinds of public stuff, but we didn't need to. We didn't need to do something like this. We didn't have to do a talk show or whatever, because we were just so content within our own field, and we were so prolific, and we could entertain ourselves, and we were so able to mature without the world. But now that Melissa's not here anymore, now I'm just here, and I'm like, okay, I absolutely, obviously have to be in the world. And so here I am. I go in the world. I have like one friend, Stephanie, really, that is as serious about this as I am, and I go out in the world, and it's like, okay, where is everybody? And it's really kind of hard to really fathom how few people in our civilization are really able to do what we're doing here. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard, but people are just so distracted with the matrix, and they're so, tied up in projection. We're so addicted to projection and displacement. It's so easy and cathartic to just be like, the world has to change. When is the world going to change? When are the politicians going to change? When are the bad guys going to go away? Just, it's all about that. And then it's not really so much about what am I doing internally myself. How dedicated am I to actually cleaning myself out, to understanding myself, to understanding my own psyche, to understanding my perceptions and what's behind my projections, and really clarifying my psyche and my whole state of consciousness. I mean, there's plenty of people who are meditating and stuff, but that is very helpful. And that does clear you to a degree, but there's so much stuff that's below that has to be worked with. And it's just, this is not in our culture. It's just not. And so it's not that many people. But even though it's a small percentage of people, if those people knew about each other, if those people had a yearly conference that they could go to, the serious ones, because let's say, even if it's 0.01% of the population that's doing this or could do this successfully, that's a lot of people if you put them together in one place. Or if you can get a slice of those people to get onto a program like this, we could do a lot. And so this is how it has to be done. It's a small amount of people. It's going to grow. I see it as another wave of the human potential movement, and it hasn't really taken off yet. People are sort of, they're like, oh, shadow work, yeah, I should play around with that, or they're kind of, just it's like that. And 10 years ago, it wasn't really, people didn't really talk about that so much, except for the Jungians. Now a lot of people are. But people have also gotten how serious it is. And so a lot of people kind of peeled back. But it is slowly moving forward. And so if we can just get the serious people together and get them to cooperate and help each other, then we could actually be in a place where we could start. Other people have to see what we're doing. They have to hear from us. They need to hear our experiences. They need to hear what we've done that was successful, how we're doing our relationships in this way, what kinds of shadow work practices we're doing, what it's like, how hard really is it, what do you go through. They need to hear about the actual experience of life through this in this way. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, well, right. And then the people who have the potential to do this will start to get on board with it. Because not everybody actually has the potential to have, like what I'm going to talk about today, an alchemical relationship. If you look at spiral dynamics or integral theory, most of the people in first tier probably can't do this until they get to the green level. That's when they can start to do have this kind of relationship. And then by doing this, that actually will work you into second tier. So once you get to green, and I don't know what the numbers are, but I think Ken Wilber says something like 25% of Americans or something are in green. But the problem is that it's very shadowy right now. The green level in the United States is very shadowy. In something like Holland or something, it's like half the population is in green, something like that. So this could be, but out of all those people, only a percentage of them will be oriented in this way. Okay, so it doesn't, just because you got 8 million people in Holland or whatever that maybe could do this, maybe doesn't mean they won't. But there maybe there's like a simplified, maybe out of all of this, a simplified kind of type of practice will come out of it. Kind of like in with yoga. If you really look at what yoga is, out of India and different types of yoga, and the hatha yoga that most people do is like 1 out of 7 or 8 types of yoga, and it's a whole big thing. And so yoga is just a tiny fraction of what yoga is being used in the West, but it's better than nothing. And so maybe we can do that with this kind of alchemy, is have people doing a more basic level of it. I mean, I've been working for years on trying to, create some kind of a system, but it's a work in progress. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing, and so we just have to plow through and just have to do this. And the number one important thing is actually not the social outreach, it's the doing the work. That's number one. But then once you get to a certain point of experience, then you can start moving into social outreach. And so that's where I am right now. And I'm like trying to navigate the whole thing, trying to figure out, what's possible, what's not possible, all of that. And so that's kind of where I am, and that might have even sounded confusing a little bit, everything I just said, because maybe I'm still a little bit confused about the whole thing, and where are we, and what's possible, and where are the other alchemists, and why is it actually so scary to them? Really why? And so all I really know is I could just get out there, keep talking, ask you guys to share the work with other people. I give away my books. Well, my last book is free on shadowtechalchemy.com. Go get the book. You'll be on the mailing list. Read it. There's 30 shadow work practices in there across 4 quadrants. And so if you want to see the movie about Melissa, go to melissamarimovie.com and then just send me a message. Send me a text saying that you want to see the movie, and I'll send you the private link to the movie. It won't be out till later in this year, but I can send it to anybody, and so you can see all about Melissa, a true alchemist. Just the most dedicated alchemist. You'll come across, and there's information in there about our relationship and all of that. So that's all available. I put all that out for people. So now. Earthkeeper 13, hi. It takes courage and dedication to do shadow work. It does. It really does. And so there's only a certain, so even though there's more people who could do this, technically they could. They're at a stage of consciousness where they could do it, but they're not being called. They're not being called to do it for whatever reason. And they just haven't reached a point of where I think there's just a combination of things that have to come in. There's a combination of external reality. You kind of have to kind of hit the wall, and you kind of have to kind of be suffering. You have to kind of experience your own cycles, your own crash, you have to crash a number of times before you finally get, okay, I got to do this work. And there's just a number of things that kind of have to come together, and then you have to it has to be in you. It has to be in your soul path. But I do think that those of us who are on the cutting edge of this, those people who know this is in our soul path, when we start talking about it, and we start, when first we take it seriously, then we start dialoguing about it, we start putting it in social media, we start really, and people can see that we're serious, and it just, then you'll start to see, more the light bulb will turn on in other people. And so, yeah. Stephanie says, there's no place in the world for shadow work, you must choose it. Yeah, there's no, right, there's no, right, exactly. Well, maybe there's a program like this where people who are doing it can come and talk about it, but yeah, there's no cultural avenue, there's no place in the culture for it. It's really not even an external thing, really. I mean, so yeah, okay. So that's kind of like some proselytizing or whatever about the cause and about the challenge and where we're at culturally with it. But so now let's go into our subject here and so my I would never have guessed that I would be talking about relational alchemy, relationship alchemy, advancing or evolving yourself, maturing yourself through the container of a relationship. I mean, you could just say conscious relationships. I already, that was a term that I recognized years ago, and that's been around for decades, just having a conscious relationship. But this is more than a conscious relationship. This is a conscious relationship. Definitely, it is a conscious relationship. But it is a relationship where both individuals are not just interested in being conscious, meaning aware, and having conversations that are deeper, or working through conflict with conversations, or seeing a therapist or whatever it is, or reading self-help books or whatever. This is for people who recognize that if they will do this, then they recognize that this is like the royal road to enlightenment. That this is a very, very high level of inner work and life practice and lifestyle that is can be a little bit, it's very challenging, because when you get into conflicts, you can't blame the other person. And not only do you not just say, okay, I'll own my part of it and all of that, and you just admit that you are part of the conflict, but you use the conflict to inform you about the nature of the conflict, what's behind the conflict, and why does the same conflict keep cycling? What is that down there in both of us? Because we both are contributing to it. So we both have some kind of what you could call pain body profile. And that pain body profile of both of us has merged together, and now we have a single complex within the relationship. And that thing is turning, and that thing has a life cycle, and it's sucking us into it. And we have to actually excavate that thing within ourselves, and then pull that out and understand what is this thing, what is its nature, what are its features, and really dig in there and use the triggers in the relationship as the doorway into the excavation, right? So because there's only so much excavation you can do, or there's only a level of depth that you can get to just on your own triggers that happen in the world. Now, you can get with a therapist, and good luck finding a really good one. But if you can, because there are some, if you can, and you can afford it and all of that, then that's great, because that's another person that can form an alchemical field, right? The transference and counter-transference, they call it. And it's a relational field, and that field does heat up the whole thing and make a lot more possible. You can do a whole lot on your own that you have to do on your own before you can even, go to the next level of relationship. And so you have to be when you're single, when you're alone, you're doing the work, and then when you're in relationship, you're doing it at the next level. And so this is a very challenging thing, where the relationship is like a hot fire, or let's just say it's a vessel. And sometimes things bubble up in there, and you get alchemizing, catalyzing kind of operation going on in there. And then when that happens, you're like, wow, okay, something is being created here. Something is bubbling up. There's some potential gold that's being made here. Let's go into that, and then that becomes a focus for you in your life. And when you're really on your path, those things that come up are, that's the best thing in life. That's better than anything else. You get into a conflict, and that part sucks. But then the conflict starts to fall to the background, but then it's left all of these clues, it's left all of this information, and it's pulled up all these feelings in both people that can now go into those things and trace them down to where you need to go to start getting access to the source of the pain body, the source of the conflict. And then you can start digging it out and bringing that stuff up into consciousness. So, and you live for that. You're like, you don't like conflict. It doesn't feel good, but you recognize that you can tolerate a certain amount of suffering, relational suffering, because you know this is what makes the gold. And when both people are like, yes, we don't like this, but this is where we go, and both people are on that path, you have something incredibly powerful and transformative and evolutionary, and you will mature rapidly with that kind of a relationship. And so that's what we're doing here. Can you speak on what commonly plays out in unconscious triggering in relationship, and what offloading the energy looks like when you aren't doing the work? Right. When you aren't doing the work, you're blaming the other person, or you're blaming someone else in the world. You're projecting and displacing onto some other thing in life or in the world. You're doing it in some workplace relationship, you're doing it online, you're doing it with your political stuff, or whatever you're doing is you're dumping your junk into the world in some way, or you're drinking or drugging or whatever. You're dumping your junk into the world, or you're trying to tame the dragon somehow with some kind of drinking or drug or distraction. And so that's what you're doing when you're not doing the work. And then when you are doing the work, you are, let me go back to your question, commonly plays out in unconscious triggering in relationship. What's commonly happening is that everybody has, we used, I like Eckhart Tolle's term pain body. Even though I would use IFS, I would use Robert Moore's archetypes, I would use Jung's ideas, use all kinds of different layers or maps, let's say, to address this. But I think the pain body one is a really good basic level understanding. And the literature on it is very simple to read. It's just like 1 or 2 chapters in his books. And he's got lectures on it and stuff. So it's really useful, because it's just, there's not a whole lot of studying or imagining that has to go on to make this click in your head. But so depending on how you were wounded, or how your parents or ancestors were wounded, you get passed on some kind of patterning, some kind of profile that is particular to your upbringing, to your heritage, to your particular traumatic events that happened in life, and your personality and all of that. And that patterning fits within, personality types or other archetypal lines. So it's not, it's individual, it's individualized. Your particular pain body profile, your trauma profile, we could call it, is particular to you, but it's also similar to a lot of other people, because these things they happen archetypally. And so when you hook up with somebody else, that has a pain body profile, a trauma profile that fits with yours, right? And so then together they form a very energetic circuit. So that thing is there. That thing is down there. And in the same way that when we're alone, we have different cycles of self-abuse or cycles of destruction in life that are turning, and we have unconscious patterning that is steering that. Well, when you get together with somebody, now you have those patterns, and it takes a little while, and then they integrate together. And then you have a single kind of entity that lives in the relationship. And that thing is looking or waiting for its next opportunity to get an energetic fix, right? Tolle talks about it as, he calls it a psychic parasite. So it's basically looking for energy food. And it gets high on what makes you feel bad. And so it gets high on rage, or it gets high on grief, or on fear, on shame, on despair, on all these kinds of shadow, these kind of shadow states. And then it, is, and so what happens is this thing, when one person's pain body wants to feed, it will wait until the other person's pain body is ready for a cycle, and then it will start triggering the other person. And it could do it very overtly and, sort of in a masculine way. It could attack the other person, or it could do it covertly. There's a million different ways in which someone can covertly trigger the other person's pain body. It's saying, I want to play. I want to play. Are you ready to play? And so it could be anything that triggers it. It could be anything. And then behind that trigger, the way somebody spoke, or something that happens in the world, just somebody's take on something will be skewed, and then that will trigger them. The pain body is down there. It's, influencing your perception until it can catch you and trigger you. And when both people are in the right state, and then boom, then you get a conflagration, then you get a fire, then you get an explosion, you get a conflict, right? And so then the conflict plays out, and then the way people go through the stages of handling the conflict is dependent on their way of coping, their coping style. And so, some people will kind of recede back, some people will attack back, some people will recede and then wait and become abused for a little while, and then they'll flip, and then they'll become the abuser, and then that other person will flip, and then they'll be the victim, and you'll have this whole cycle, and then the whole thing will conclude after a bit. And some people have it so bad, the pain body is so reckless and in need of a fix, that it will end with somebody going to jail, or somebody getting shot, or just some big thing, some big trauma drama in life, right? But most people, it's not that extreme, and it's just a conflict, and it's just like, oh, here we go again, right? And so that's a pain body feeding, and it's in both people. So the aggressor, the person who's seems to be the aggressor, the attacker, is that's their role. So they're on top. But what most people can't quite get here is that, it takes a while to get this, is that the other person, the victim, their ego consciousness doesn't want to be victimized, but their pain body is looking for a fix. So their pain body was poking on the other person's pain body to try to get that thing going. So the shadow or the pain body of the victim is also equally involved. It's a 50-50 thing. And it takes a while for people to take responsibility for that, especially people who have identified, have some kind of victim type of identification, whether they're conscious of it or not. They have some kind of victim identification, and it's very difficult for them to recognize that, I'm part of the problem, or there's a part of me that's part of the problem that's been activating this, in the man or in the other person. So there's also something I should say about that has been pointed out to me, and I think is very true, is that it's when you're in this, when you're looking at things from this perspective, and you're trying and you're getting into conflicts with the other person, and you recognize that we're both involved and we both have to take responsibility for our side of the conflict. That's very hard. It's very hard, especially because one person will be the overt actor. And so it's often, it's just very hard for either side, actually. It's hard for them for each side to say, okay, even though what you were doing seemed like it was trying to hurt me, I recognize that there was a part of me, there would have to be a part of me that was looking for that, and that we're both doing this. It takes two to tango. It's just happening in the unconscious. And now I have to go look for that. I have to go look for that part of me that might want to be abused. Now, at the same time, what I was going to say is that there's a certain level of healthy boundaries that people have to learn to establish in life. And a lot of people have boundary issues, and they either cross other people's boundaries too easily, or they let other people cross their boundaries too easily. And this is a certain stage of work that you have to get through before you can actually get to the level of where you're taking responsibility for your own pain body and in this kind of a relationship. And you might be the two might be merging. You might still have some boundary issues while you're moving into this kind of a relationship. So there is a sort of a objective standard of boundaries that each person does have to kind of get to that level of things. But then once you can get through that level, then you can get to this level of where everybody's taking responsibility for their side of the thing, and they're using the conflict as a way to go and excavate what's down below it. So after the conflict, then you sit down with it, and then you talk about it, and you say, well, what feelings were coming up? And what you'll notice that before the fight, there may have been little attempts for the fight to start before that. Or a person might be getting into interactions at work or somewhere else in life before the conflict with their wife or husband started. And so there was the pain body was already active. And so then they can start to look at that and say, yeah, you know what? I realized that my consciousness was shifted before this happened. Like I came home from work or whatever, and there was something in me, and it was like it wanted this. And then the other person is like, yeah, I know, I felt that, but I also felt something in me yesterday because when I was, out doing my errands, blah, 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 blah. And they'll talk about how that they noticed that even before the fight, the day before or hours before, there was something in the field, there was something in consciousness that was showing them, if they just had eyes to see, that something was afoot, that something was going to happen. And then after you study this long enough, then you get to the point to where you can actually say, hey, I feel something. And Melissa and I got to this level to where we're like, okay, something wants to hook. Something's trying to hook right now. And I'll be like, yeah, you're right. Something is. I feel it in me too. And so then we have to be on the lookout for it. And then what you do, if you can get to it before the conflict starts, then you can do the John Ruskin emotional clearing, emotional processing that I always talk about, which I'll talk about again. But or if the conflict does happen, then you can go sit on the couch and you can go do the emotional processing after the fact. And so that's very important that you move those emotions and that you not just push it back down again. But it's also important that you actually be an alchemist, you be a magician, you be an inner scientist and you actually start using some kind of useful model for understanding what's going on down there, and you use that to dissect the problem or to problem solve the situation. And so Melissa and I, we used all kinds of different models, and the pain body one is very useful and easy. You can use the internal family systems understanding. That's relatively easy too. And you got an exile, and then you got protectors that are either managers or firefighters, and then you start to get in touch with those parts of yourself, and you name them, and you find out what their personality styles are and what their needs are. And then you have some kind of understanding of the nature of the parts in you that are involved in this. Or if you're using Robert Moore's system, you can talk about it in terms of archetypes and bipolar shadow archetypes. You can use it, the Jungian understanding, you could just call them autonomous complexes. And in Jung's understanding, there's an archetypal core behind every autonomous complex. So then you can go look for the archetype that's feeding it. And I'm sure there's many other ways to model all of this. And you just got to go on your own journey and do that. And you have to be willing to, hey, let's figure this out. Let's figure this out. What part of me is doing that? And then where was it formed? Where was that formed in childhood? How long have I been doing this kind of conflict? How long have I been turning this kind of cycle? Did my parents do this? Which parent did it? And you go back down and you start tracing it down and bringing that stuff up and talking about it and journaling about it and looking at mythology and aligning it with different characters, whether in myth or in culture, and just the whole Jungian thing. You just do all that stuff. And so there has to be a part of this to really get to a level of, we're moving towards mastery. I guess there's different people will be at different levels of this, and some people will be content to just be at a certain level with this. But I think the real alchemist is someone who's just continuing to go deeper and deeper. And so I don't think I'm going to go into every single one of those ways in which we can map the psyche and then talk about it and problem solve with each of those right now. I mean, that's just all I talk about all the time. But I will just remind everybody, it's in the emotional clearing process, which we called emotional processing, is in Transforming Darkness. It's in both books. Transforming Darkness is on the website, shadowtechalchemy.com. You can get it for free. Just sign up for the mailing list, and there you go. There's the PDF, or you can get it on Amazon. And the process is described there. So you just go sit down with the emotions, and you allow them to come up, and you purge them. And so very simple, but that is something that you do either before a conflict or right after a conflict, and then you just you map it and you try to understand it. Now, when you find one of these parts that is responsible for some of this stuff, or a part that feels needy, or a part that feels ashamed, or a part that feels victimized, you can name that part. It'll a lot of times tell you what its name is. It'll just come to you. And then when you talk to each other, when you talk to your wife or husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, and something is sticking out, something is coming up, something kind of triggery is coming up, you can say, oh, there's mad girl. Mad girl's up. Mad girl's up. Oh yeah, mad girl, there you go. And so then when you talk to her, you can talk to mad girl. And you can say, well, when this conflict happened, when this fight happened, blah, 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 mad girl was doing this and mad girl was doing that. And that lets you take the pressure off the other person's ego. It's not, Mary or Cindy or whoever that's the bad girl that's started the conflict. It's a part of her that we call mad girl that is addicted to this whole cycle. And so that's a very important thing to do, is to name these parts, and so you can talk to each other, and you can name the part instead of naming the other person's name, and that brings a little bit of pressure off of it, and it puts the attention down into the psyche, not on the ego. Let's see, Stephanie says, like a man or woman saying, why do I always date crazy women, taking no mutual responsibility? Yeah, he doesn't know that he has a pain body, and his pain body is looking for somebody else with a pain body profile that fits with his, so that they can have their trauma drama cycle together. He just doesn't know that. He still thinks that it's all happening in the out there. It's all somebody else doing it. It's all crazy women. It's just, man, there's so many crazy women. Why do I just keep finding them? I have bad luck. It's just like, wow, that's, it seems like it's really dense, but this is where we're at. And so, as alchemists, as individuals, we are the great work. Yes, we literally are. Nature is evolving through all of us. And some of us are just like we're scientists of the psyche. We're a particular type of cell in the social body. We're a particular type of cell, and like the New Agers used to say, imaginal cells. I don't know if they were New Agers that said that, but Elizabeth Sahtouris and I don't know, Barbara Marx Hubbard, those kind of people, they would say imaginal cells, which are a type of cells which are the early butterfly cells. When a caterpillar is turning into a butterfly and it's in the chrysalis, the imaginal cells are the first. They're like the stem cells. They're like the first cells of the butterfly. And at first they get attacked by the caterpillar's immune system. But as the caterpillar dies out more, then more and more of the imaginal cells take over. And then you get a whole butterfly body. And then you have a whole new organism coming out of there. And so nature's doing this. And nature's doing this through us. And we're kind of self-identifying, because no one in the culture is saying, oh yeah, where are the alchemists? I know I'm not the only person that uses the term alchemist, but when Melissa and I started doing this, and it took off very quick, this would have been 2013, we didn't even know we were doing alchemy. I had seen that individuation. I had been reading some Jungian books, and I knew that alchemy was related to what we were doing, but I didn't really know much about it and hadn't really looked at it. And it was about a year into my relationship with Melissa that we just ran into some YouTube video where somebody was explaining alchemy, and they were explaining it in the spiritual or psychospiritual way, not just the physical way. And we said, wow, that's what we're doing. This is it. This is alchemy. And we're like, yeah. And so then I had to start looking more and more into it and figure it out, and the basic stages and all of that. But so then we were like, okay, well, what are we? Okay, we're imaginal cells. Okay, that sounds kind of new agey or something weird. That doesn't seem right. Are we shaman? Oh, that sounds really pretentious. That doesn't sound like we liked the idea. We realized we were on the shamanic path, and that if our role in an indigenous society would be shaman, we would be if we were in an indigenous society. But it just didn't seem. That just seemed kind of. That term was already getting abused and just didn't seem like it clicked. So we started calling ourselves alchemists, because not too many people were using that, and that term hadn't been ruined yet. And then just, I kind of followed Melissa's lead on that. She really took to it, and she would put that in her profile or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that does work. It doesn't sound pretentious. It doesn't sound, and then once I figured out what the alchemists were doing, and I figured out that Jungian psychology really is spiritual alchemy, and that his whole thing was really, he took his whole science, and then he, later in life, he figured out alchemy. He said, oh yeah, it's the same thing. And so when I say I'm an alchemist, I'm also saying I'm a Jungian, and I do consider myself to be a Jungian. And so there we go. So it's the perfect term. It works. And now I'm just like using it constantly. And I know there's other people using it that aren't as serious as me, but that's okay. They're at least pointing to the right thing. So, right. Okay. So that's what makes it challenging is because we're not just alchemists we're not scholars of esoterica. We might also be. We're not historians of esoterica. We're not just people interested in what alchemists were doing or what the esoteric tradition was doing, and reading the Dead Sea Scrolls or old alchemical texts, whatever. We're not that. We might be doing that. That might be interesting to us, but we're workers. We're in the laboratory. We're doing the work on ourselves, and we're constantly analyzing ourselves and getting in touch with our lower material and pulling it up, and hopefully we have other people in our lives that we can work with it with. And so we're actually working on it. We're not just reading about what other people did in history and stuff. So, but I got some notes here, and where are we now? Okay. So it requires both this. So this path, this relational alchemy, requires both individuals be on the path of enlightenment, or whether you call it that or not, on the alchemical path, committed to self-discovery above all. Without that, this type of relationship won't work or won't happen. 100% transparency. This is very important. I know when relationships are newer, it takes time for people to gain trust in each other. And so that's obvious. And we don't probably just, tell the other person every dark thing that is in our past or things that we're ashamed of, just right off the top. Some people do. I mean, Melissa, it didn't take too long for all that stuff to come out, but eventually it all has to come out. Eventually all that stuff has to, if the relationship lasts and trust is formed, and it indicates, it's indicated that this is an alchemical relationship. We have the potential to do this work, and both people say we want to do this. Then you kind of just start putting stuff on the table. Okay, well then check this out. Okay, well then check this out. Now check this out. Now check this out. What do you think about this? And just start pulling it out. So everything comes out of the closet. Everything just starts coming out of the closet. Also, there's no lying. Lying is impossible in this relationship. You can't lie. Nobody can lie, period, ever, 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 ever. No lying ever. And if you find yourself wanting to lie or something like that, you got to catch yourself and going. And then it might be, people lie because they don't have full trust, and that is a lot of times coming out of their family background and parental style and how things worked out in childhood, and they may not have been able to trust the parents, and so they may have trust issues. So I'm not saying it's something you do immediately, but this is the path. And so total transparency. The goal is 100% transparency with everything, with the stuff that's in the closet, plus the stuff that's coming up now. If somebody says, if somebody's afraid of marriage, okay, that fear of marriage gets talked about. If someone says, I'm not sure I fully trust you, and part of me wants to see your text messages, wants to ask you whether or not I can see your text messages to see if you're cheating on me. Well, just tell the other person. A part of you wants that. And then you can talk about it and work through that, And then hopefully Yes, the other person will say, okay, we've worked through that. Now I'm going to show you my text messages, right? And so transparency in every way is got to be the goal. 100% has to be the goal. Let me respond to Earthkeeper. Well, I'm learning how to do this show at the same time, and I think responding to you guys at the same time is kind of better than kind of just making people wait 20 minutes or something. In an alchemical relationship, all impurities rise to the top to be seen and addressed. Yeah, they do. They rise to the top, and but we naturally may have the inclination to want to push them back down, or want to, not address something until later and put things off and stuff. So we have to recognize that this is kind of the standard of this kind of relationship, is everything needs to be alchemized. Everything needs to be processed. And I remember there was one time where Melissa and I had a fight, and a lot of the wisdom that came out of our relationship just came out of the unconscious. It just popped out. It just blurted out. It was just stuff would happen, and then somebody would say something incredibly deep or wise, and it'd be like, oh, wow, okay, that's true. Remember that. And then we would write that down on the whiteboard or in a notebook or something, and we would remember that phrase. And so, yeah, and there's a lot of other stuff that I could talk about, not just working with conflicts, but how that you're constantly mining, and you're being an artist. You're being a life artist. That's what she called it, being a life artist. You're being a life artist. And artists, and we were both professional artists, and so artists know that creative stuff just bubbles out of the unconscious. And when it does, you go, yes, give me that. I'll take that. Thank you. That's going into that poem. That's going into that song. That's going into that painting. That's going into my art. And so you're also doing that. You're letting, you're got your eye out for stuff like that. When stuff pops out, you grab it and use it. But one of the things that came out was we were fighting or something like that, and then we were trying to talk it out. And this is what in probably the first year or two. And I said, Melissa, you cannot ever avoid conflict. You can't avoid conflict, period. It's impossible. You can't do it. Don't try to do it. And she thought, and I just I had never even said that before. And it came out, and then we both really realized, oh yeah, that's true. You have to use the conflict. You can't avoid it. You use it. So that's like a key thing to understand here, is that conflicts, they tone down, the pain body calms down, the conflicts, they lower in intensity, things become more symbiotic over time as you work through what's behind the conflicts. That's how you reduce conflict, is working through what's behind it, not by trying to avoid it. Gary Zukoff, right, would say spiritual partners stay together as long as they grow together. That's right. That's right. And so when you're on this path, you're wanting to grow, and you're inviting the other person to grow with you. A life artist, I love that. Nothing is wasted. Yes. I encourage you to watch the movie about Melissa, and this is discussed in the movie, and she was a naturally a life artist. A life artist is somebody who is, we worked on this concept for a while, actually, try to figure out what is it exactly, because there's different kinds of life artists. There's the life artist who is making their life is very artistic, and whether they are an artist or maybe they don't even think of themselves as an artist, but if you meet them and you see the way they do their life, you'll realize it's very original, and it's original, and trying to find adjectives to try to describe this. It's kind of just, it's their own thing. It's kind of funky and it's their own thing. And, you know, they do this over here and then they do this over here, and they plug into the world in a variety of ways. And it's all about having fun and enjoying themselves and doing things that are stimulating and a lot of times aesthetically pleasing and arty, and, you know, usually arty and stuff. And so there's people that have lives like that, and they're life artists, or just whatever their profession is. They really approach it from a point of view of play and creativity, and so that's a life artist. But that's kind of the secular side of it, and then you have the spiritual side of it, where the person is doing that also, but they're a spiritual artist. And so they're very aware of how the unconscious is informing their life art, and they're looking at their dreams, and they're studying what comes up in conflict, and they're having conversations with their partner that are very intellectually and spiritually stimulating, and they're getting material out of that. And they are looking at synchronicities. They're living to some degree by synchronicities. So synchronicities show up in the world and they say, wow, look at that. Look what that's showing me. And then they use the synchronicity to make decisions in life. They go in this direction because of a synchronicity. Stephanie and I had a conversation today that was utilizing that. And so, yeah, we allow synchronicities to inform us and direct us, and or dreams. And so this is more of well, we also had a concept called living in the movie, and you recognize the projected or movie-like nature of reality, and then you're interpreting your world the way like an art student would study a really deep movie. And, you know, and what are the symbolic, you know, motifs that are behind that scene or that character or whatever, and you're really mining reality for symbolic meaning and recognizing the interplay between the external world and your psyche. And there's a relationship between the external world and what's going on in the external world and your own psyche. It's informing you, and you're actually informing it too. And just be awaking up to this co-creative field between you and the external world. So that's being a spiritual life artist. And so that's what we are doing. And I would say that's being an alchemist. So that's also part of the stew, part of the life path, in whatever way, because I've just met enough of these alchemist life artists to know that they agree with that. So they're doing that too in their own way. Let's see what we got here in the notes. We talked about the relational pain body already. We just started off with that, actually, and the conditions that trigger it. Emotionally processing the energy behind the conflicts. I'm not going to talk about the whole emotional processing method that much because I've talked about it a lot, and it's in Transforming Darkness and in Shadow Tech, which you can get. But I will be always talking about that. It's very simple. It's just like what I said. You just sit and allow the emotions to come up. And if it's anger on top, you just allow that to give way to grief or fear or some more feminine emotion, and you just allow it to move through your body. There's a little bit more I could say on it, but that's basically what it is. You gotta purge the emotions that are the repressed emotions. Discover part names and address them as parts. It's not you, it's your part. Yeah, we talked about that. I said, maybe, if somebody's acting out, it's not her, it's Mad Girl that's doing it, right? Or it's Running Girl that's doing it, or it's Sick Girl, or whatever name you name that part, so you don't have to address that other person directly. We talked about that. We talked about boundaries. learn different models of the psyche and shadow. Yeah, the magician aspect, the wanting to be curious enough to learn things and to read books, to actually read books again. You got to read and learn and practice different shadow work methods. Yeah, trying different things. And so I could let me see what else I can think of on this subject matter, because we've been talking about it for a little over about an hour, and if I could kind of tune in to Melissa and kind of I think I kind of addressed it. It's just you just develop and the more you do this, the more you open up with the other person, and the more you're transparent, and the more you put stuff on the table, then the more trust develops, and then you have more intimacy. And that's just the greatest thing. I mean, I never had a intimacy with anybody, with any woman like I did with Melissa, because of the work of this refinement work and the path of becoming increasingly transparent. There was, there just really wasn't, there was just nothing hidden. And so this, you just get in, I just never felt so intimate with anybody else. Just so, like, the whole field is very intimate, and there's just nothing being held back. And it's crazy to see people have relationships where they don't even really know what their spouse's childhood background was like. Like, they've never even really questioned them. They've never really even talked about it. Like, they'll know something, they'll know some things, they will have heard some stories, but neither person is really inclined to really, like, go down that road and pull out all that stuff and share it. And the other person is not asking because they don't want to touch on stuff that's difficult. And so you have this relatively superficial relationship, even if you're married and you've known the person for 30, 40 years. I know people that have known themselves or known each other or been married for 40 years, and they've no level of, like 10% of the level of intimacy that I had with Melissa, or 20% of that kind of intimacy. And it's like, there's nothing more fulfilling. There's nothing more fulfilling. But I also do understand that I kind of have to remind myself that not everybody has the capacity for this. Back to spiral dynamics, people at red, blue, even orange, stages may not have the capacity for this. It's just not. It's not. Or I see people that their spouse dies, and yes, they suffer over it, but there's the depth of the suffering and the depth of what they get out of it, the meaning that can come out of that. They're just not really mining it for meaning, and it's just like, okay, my partner died, move on. And it's like, it's like you look at an animal like a squirrel or a deer or something, that another member of its family got hit by a car, and they go over there and they smell the carcass of the other animal for a little while, and they kind of sit there and they cope with it for about a minute, and then they go off to their lives. And you're like, okay, that's where a little animal is at. It's got some curiosity. It recognizes that its mother, father, sister, brother is dead, and it's curious about it and trying to figure out what's going on, and it's probably still processing it. It probably takes time for the animal, for a squirrel, to process the loss, maybe a few days even. But then it's, because that's a squirrel, it's a simpler animal. And I look at a lot of humans, and humans are just more simple than me. They just don't have that kind of depth or ability to process emotions, or ability to be intimate, ability to, navigate this kind of thing. They just don't have the capacity for it. It's just not part of their makeup. And so I have to recognize that. But there's still a lot of people who can do this, and that's what I was saying earlier. Got to find those people and start being and supporting each other and encouraging each other to stay on the path and to go deep and to talk about it and all of that and to make all this more public. And then that will awaken more people that can do this, and that's how the human race evolves. I have another thing on my notes here. If anybody wants to call in, to the show, I know we just have a few people on here right now, but if anyone wants to call in, and then just send me a text at one of the phone numbers. You can go to the YouTube description, and if you're in the US, there's a US number. Send a text to that number. Just say this, put your name in there, and I'll call you right back. Or if you're outside the US, just use the WhatsApp, because pretty much everybody outside the US, not everyone, but a lot of people outside the US have WhatsApp. Text me through the WhatsApp number, and then I'll call you back and I'll pull you on. I always want to give that opportunity to people who want to do that. And I noticed that somebody just fell off as soon as I said that. But yeah, so if anybody wants that, then they can. And so let's give a minute for I'll just talk for a few minutes on this other subject, and we'll see if anybody wants to call in, because anything that you got is good. Anything. I don't know if people were on here a couple days ago when Theo called in from Thailand. We had Monica call in a few days before that. It's very good. It's very helpful, and I think really makes for good programming when people do call in. But I was going to talk about Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is a very, very interesting phenomenon psychologically, because taking a psychological or Jungian perspective on this. So Donald Trump represents the king archetype, and it's so interesting how he's so archetypal about it. And he's like a reality TV show star. And so he's a celebrity. And so everything is very kind of gaudy and overt. But he's like, paint the White House gold. And he just acts like, especially in his second term, he just acts like I'm the king and whatever I say goes. And it's like that triggers a lot of people, and it's pathological. I'm not triggered by it. I just look at it as a phenomenon, because I know that he is a product of the consciousness of the United States, of America. He is the product of our consciousness. All presidents are, right? They give us a view of our personality type, of a view of our shadow contents, and our level of maturity, and all of that. And to really get a good view on this, you can't just take the superficial, newspaper version, the encyclopedia entry on Barack Obama or on Bill Clinton or on Donald Trump. You have to do real research and find out really what is in this person's personality and what do they really like, to get a full picture. And you'll never really know what they're like, but you don't want to just take the superficial story but you do need to look at that, though, because that is It's part of your diagnosis too. But what was I saying in there about him is that his unconsciousness. So he has so much libido, so much, psychic energy that it's just pouring out. He sleeps 4 or 5 hours a night, and he's like already like 80 years old, and he's just got so much energy, but it's so loose, right? And what happens when people get into positions of authority, of power, especially at that level? That's the highest level of, at least openly, highest level of political power on the planet. And everybody has a different capacity to be able to handle that. So some presidents are just going to delegate a lot of stuff, and they're just going to offshore, or what was the term I'm looking for? They're going to put responsibilities off on other people because they just can't handle it all. They just can't handle making decisions about everything and contemplating everything. But Donald Trump is the kind of guy that, even though he's not competent to handle all these things, he's willing to try. And so it's not the smart move to do that. He can't really handle it all, but he wants to. His ego is so big, he's got so much grandiosity that he wants to handle everything. He wants to be daddy. He wants to be the king. And but his libido energy is just loose, and it's just all over the place. And it's just so interesting for me to watch his so funny how I tied alchemical relationships and I'm going into Donald Trump. But his maybe we'll be able to bring it together. But he's so unconscious. Let me see what I have in here. His energy is very powerful, and he's a very powerful person. Obviously, he beat all odds to make it to president, but he is unconscious of the flow of his energy and the good it can do or the damage it can cause. He doesn't recognize that his energy needs to be monitored. I see where I'm going with this. He doesn't know how to work with his thoughts and feelings or how to process repressed emotions. He's not getting above his ego and watching and monitoring his energy output nearly as well as he could be. And because of his position, there are vast repercussions. Oh, I see why I have this in my notes here. Now recognize that this is almost everyone. Almost everyone is unconscious of their libido, and they do not have a cultural standard of maturation. For example, we can take Robert Moore's standard of the royal and how to work with your archetypal energies to achieve psychospiritual maturation in the royal. The royal is described, and the archetypes that need to be worked with are described. That's a standard. But the society doesn't know about this or recognize this as important, or integral theory, or whatever, kinds of levels of models and standards of the maturation of our consciousness. We don't have that really. That's not really in our view. We have the capacity to think and feel at second tier, but we don't know that this is possible. Some of us do. Some of us have the capacity to think and feel at second tier, but we don't even know that it's possible. We don't even have any model. No one's talking about that. So that's why I wrote this, is that I felt like, wow, because Trump is so right there in front, and you can just look at him and you can study him. And he gives you a view of the whole collective. The whole collective, whether you voted for him or not, the whole collective unconsciously put him there. He represents the ego of our civilization, and or part of it. Yeah, I mean, he represents the old model of everything that America and sort of 1950s kind of, we're the greatest country on earth and we win wars and we invent all the great things, and we're also very hospitable to people who have been oppressed, and we have all these moral standards and legal standards and all this kind of stuff, and everything that goes into the ego of America, right? So Trump is kind of a version of that. And so, we all can learn from that and everything. But my point with this was that we use him as an example, or anyone that's in a position of power, and look at how difficult it is to manage your energy. And some people get way less power. So many people get just a little bit of influence and then they just blow up. They can't handle it. I mean, they get like, YouTube and become a YouTube influencer or something like that. And then and they just blow up and stuff. They just can't handle it. Or they'll get a job promotion at work or something, and then they start bossing everybody around and stuff. And it's like, so people have a very hard time with their grandiosity, with their inflation. And we just don't have some psychologists talk about this, but that's not really in our view as a people. So anyway, that was just something that I had in mind, because during the week I take notes, and thanks for the little hearts. I take notes during the week of what am I going to talk about on the next show. And so I knew I was going to talk about relational alchemy, but then I also, before that, I had this Trump thing in there. And then I just kind of started broadcasting, and I forgot about the Trump part because I didn't really arrange my thoughts about how to talk about that, but it was here, and so I thought, okay, I'll throw that out there. But the inner work movement, we have to push it, put it into the culture. Yeah, that's what I said earlier. Always talking about that. So, all right. Can we get a caller? How about Stephanie? Is she still there? I know she can call. Maybe she wants to. We'll see what she says. But so if she's there. But anyway, right now, because I feed on your comments, and I'm just back through my notes here. Yeah. So anyway, back to relational alchemy. This is how Melissa and I lived, and I was like, I say this, I know I'm going to repeat myself a lot, but I kind of have to, and that's just kind of, I was talking to Stephanie about this actually. People who do talk shows and stuff, they sort of have their repertoire, they have their subject matters, and they just talk about the same thing over and over again. And it's like, we have to get used to being able to do that. I have to get used to being able to do that. But Melissa was 50 when we met, and I was 43. And so we had been working on ourselves for years to whatever capacity we could. And then I feel like the work that we did before we met was what prepared us for it. So people say, well, why can't I find an alchemical relationship like that, or with somebody else that can do that with me? And I would say the best that you can do is just keep deepening your own work, because you know how relationships are. They happen. They just happen. The universe just presents them to you. God just presents them to you. You probably don't want to just sit at home, just not going out in the world or anything like that. But when you're at the level where you're ready for another relationship, that person will show up. And so the best thing that you can do to find that kind of a person is to be working on yourself. And then that person will show up when you're ready. And you might have to be doing some other relationships that are kind of stair-stepping you up there. And you might have to be practicing on some other relationships that might last 3 months or 6 months or a year or something like that. You might have some failed relationships. You might have one good long one and that really learn a lot through that. And then you might go through years with these little flings or some whatever, or being alone. And then you'll have another one that'll step you up another level. And so I think we were ready. We were ready for that. We're serious enough about what we were doing, and we were ready. And then it showed up. And there must be something much, much bigger than just, we were ready and then just sort of randomly, we met that other person. There must be something way bigger, way more, written into the movie of life, written into our soul code or whatever it is, that put us together, because we were so incredibly prolific, so charged with metaphysical energy and creative energy, and that's just not a random thing. And then when I just go into it with all the, with a magnifying lens, and I just look at everything about us and everything that was a match, it's just there's the it's just not an accident. It's just not random at all. And so all I can say is that the only thing I could think of that would help anyone get a higher quality, higher consciousness relationship is to raise your own consciousness. And that's by doing this shadow work, doing this shadow work, doing this inner inspection, becoming very aware of your internal state, what's going on inside you, and the different dynamics and how your reactivity, studying your thoughts, studying your feelings, studying the different cycles that are showing up, and what your attitudes and mood cycles, your whole general outlook in life, and studying your outlook, and why am I this way? Why do I think this way? Why do I like this kind of media? Why do I like this kind of politics? Why do I find myself, getting involved in this, whatever, red pill truth stuff or whatever it is? What is that rooted in? Where does that come from? What am I getting out of it? And so it's just self-awareness and deepening self-awareness, and then also awareness of other, you're not in an intimate relationship with everybody in your life. So some people are in your life and you might even be close to them, your family members, work people at work, what do we even call that? Co-workers. And, you might be, you're studying, they're interacting with you, and you may not be able to do this kind of work with them. And so you're just kind of studying, and you're watching their energy move, and you're watching them get sloppy with their energy. You're watching their parts act out. You're watching their pain body get triggered, and you're watching their reactivity. And then you have to kind of hold space with them. And then you have to not get sucked into their stuff, their pain body stuff. And then you have to somehow be there as a positive influence on them, without maybe necessarily being able to tell them everything that you know about all this stuff. And so so your other relationships besides your partner are also opportunities for studying and going on being introspective about them, and trying to understand what's going on in the psychic field between you and them, and trying out your models and your things that you're studying on them, and just being in life, being in relationship, and using your knowledge, in those situations too, not just at home. So, So anyway, that's what we're doing. Let's see, where are we on time? I think it's 8:30. Right. So, does anybody have any more comments? Does anybody want to direct the conversation into their direction by saying anything? And in the comments, and we'll go in that direction. But right now, the red pill people. Let's talk about the red pill people now. The red pill thing, and I talked about this all the time. It's important to get red pilled. It's important. It's a developmental initiation. It truly is. It is important, especially now, to recognize the ubiquity of corruption and evil in the external world. And it is not something that is, particular to one political party or to one personality type or to men or to women or to conservatives or liberals or religious people or non-religious people. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. It's very monkey level. It's primal. And everybody's involved in this. And so all kinds of but when you have different societies are at different levels or different stages of the life cycle of the society. Societies go through life cycles, and different societies are at different stages in the life cycle. And so not every society is, moving towards a dark night of the soul. They're on the upswing maybe. And so they may have already had a period of really bad corruption. And they may have already suffered some kind of a revolution or genocide or some kind of plague or anything that could have really kind of started them from scratch. And so they might be on the upswing, and people might be very attentive to their morality and very attentive to their ethics. And so they won't have nearly as much corruption. And then there are societies that have become overblown and gluttonous and lazy and privileged and blah blah blah, like ours, and they will be getting loaded up with all this kind of stuff. And so when you're in one of those, it's not probably important to really recognize this when the society is relatively healthy. But when the society is relatively unhealthy, then it's important for more and more people to start to take a reckoning of this. And then there's that process that we call the red pill awakening, where you recognize all this corruption, and then you want to say something about it. You want to do something about it. You want to become an activist, whether it's like a keyboard warrior or you're out in the street and you're doing whatever it is. However you're doing it, you're being an activist and you're trying to wake people up and look at all this corruption, look at these bad guys and all this stuff. And I think that's like an immune response in the body politic. I think that's important. That's an important stage. But you can't just be there forever. And so the next level is what I'm talking about here. The next level is when you recognize, oh, wait a minute, the reason why we even have all this integrated evil is because we all have a shadow, and we're all projecting and displacing our own shadow into the collective, just little bits at a time, and then that adds up to what we have. And so we're all responsible for it. In the same way that you have a pandemic, you have a virus, It's like a great metaphor. The whole pandemic thing that came through was really a metaphor for the collective shadow. And so when you have an individual who's sick, and then you get a bunch of individuals who are sick, you put them all together, you get one of these pandemics. But if people will start to heal themselves, then they go out there and they actually block the spread of the pandemic. And so so it's like once you get to the level where you recognize that everybody has their own darkness, they have their own evil. They have their own, you may not call it evil, you may call it a shadow, but it becomes evil when it turns into behavior. And then when it becomes extreme, if it's light, if it's just barely, somebody steals a candy bar at the corner store, we don't necessarily call that evil, but you just take it a couple steps more and it is. And so when you recognize that we all have a shadow, we all have this dark caustic material in us, and it's our responsibility to work it through and to metabolize it and become aware of it, then you move into another stage, a whole other stage of this work, a whole stage of lifestyle, a whole stage of responsibility, a stage of consciousness, a stage of maturation. When you say, okay, rather than focusing so much on the outside world, I'm going to focus on the equivalent to what is evil out there. There's an equivalent to that in me. And that's what I'm going to be working on in myself and in my relationships. So that takes you to actually curing the problem. Instead of just running around saying, look how diseased we are. Look, more disease. You're like, after a while, it's like, okay, yes, we see it. What are you going to do about it? You can't just round up everybody and just say, you'll never find the one group that's the evildoers, because it's just everywhere. It's everywhere. Every group has it. And so the only solution is when people as individuals start taking responsibility for it and cleaning it out of themselves, right? And so that's how you actually mitigate evil. And that's where you start having to take responsibility, and you can't just be displacing and dumping and projecting onto everybody else. And this is a big step. Like, it was a big step to get red-pilled in the first place and survive the initiation, and then have to reorient your whole worldview, and have to, not get so angry or depressed or whatever, and you have to reorient yourself in that new reality. That's already a big step already, to be red-pilled seriously. And then you have to, work that out in one way or another. And then to go to the next level of saying, okay, this is all being created because we're all dumping our own junk into the world, and so I better clean up my own junk. And then not focus so much on all that stuff out there and focus more on what's going on outside here. You can still keep an eye on that. You still have to. You never really, you always will keep an eye on that. But that doesn't need to be your main priority when you go to this level. So that's why this is a more lonely place. There's not a whole lot of us who are doing this, because it takes so much responsibility, like what we were talking about earlier. So this is the second initiation. You get the red pill initiation, and then you got the psychospiritual alchemist initiation, or whatever we're going to end up calling it. I mean, that's what I'm calling it. But so the red pill thing, though, and it takes a while. It takes years sometimes. Some people actually, they don't really, it doesn't need to be years for a lot of people. Some people will get red pilled and they'll be like, okay, I see that, I studied that, I figured that out, I figured out some of these scams. All right, now I'm going to get to this other stuff. And they, within a few years, they move on and they start studying some kind of yoga or some kind of spiritual practice and start doing some kind of therapy or whatever, and they just kind of move into this. Some people, it takes them many years before, because it's so addictive. The red pill world is so addictive. And it's so hard to, even me and Melissa, we followed the red pill stuff the whole time we were together doing this work. We always recognized that that's just a movie. That's not, it's not where we need to be spending all of our time. But I feel like even just now, I was red pilled 21 years ago, and I feel like I've only now been able to, like, it's like getting off heroin or something, or quitting coffee or alcohol or whatever addictive substance. It's like I feel like I still look at that stuff, but I don't feel like I'm just looking at it like an observer, like, okay, yes, okay, fine. It's not pulling me in anymore. And so it can take a long time, and you just have to kind of slowly but surely continue to kind of wean yourself off of it, and it'll eventually work its way through you. And that's how development happens. It happens in sometimes very long stages. Yeah, so whoever's sending me little hearts needs to start typing some comments. So I have some more material here. Figuring out how to do a talk show, basically. And some talk shows, they have guests, right? And I've been trying to get you guys to be guests, call into the show, and you guys fill that role, so I don't have to, start looking for guests and stuff, because that's not what my intention here is. There's not that many of us anyway, and so my intention is not to look around for other superstar alchemists and interview them. Although I do try, actually, when I find people that I see online, like on Facebook is where I basically go, and I find other people that I think are really advanced, I am starting to go to them and ask them to come on the show and ask them to call in. And I find that a lot of alchemists are very introverted. And this is a real problem, actually. This is something to talk about right now, is that so many people who are on this path are kind of introverted and kind of tucked into their little alchemical laboratories, and aren't really on the missionary side of things like I am. And so I'm, or they just feel, they're really advanced, but they're just not at the level of, they're just not in that orientation where they would, want to share their work and stuff. Or they might be good at or comfortable doing it typing, but they don't feel comfortable, being on camera or whatever. I've run into this. And so I really do everything I can to try to talk them out of that, because I need them. We need them to get public. So that, I think that'll, as we go on here, I'll be finding more and more of those people who will take my offer. And I'm open to talking to people who are at any level of this. The only thing that matters to me is that they are dedicated to it. I don't care if they've been awake to this for 1 year, right? But they're dedicated to it, and they're studying themselves, and they're working through their stuff, and they're reading some kinds of books, and they're learning. And I would gladly talk to them and have a great conversation with them and find out where they're at and learn from them, and then they can learn from me, and we can just do our thing. So it doesn't really matter to me what their level of experience is, as long as they're dedicated and this is their path. And Melissa and I, we used to have what we called a bi-weekly Zoom call. We had a Zoom call that we did every other week. And we would get people in there. Stephanie was always in there, and we get a couple other. There's a few regulars in there, and then some other people would kind of surf in and surf out. You get people that come in for a few weeks and then they surf out, and that was all fine, but it was kind of boxed into this little Zoom call that you needed the link and all that. but I still was finding it hard to bring people in, and just because I just think this is just so, unfortunately, it's so rarefied. And but that was years ago. That was, I think we started that like maybe 5 years ago. We started the Zoom calls. We did a podcast before that. We did a couple of podcasts, actually, and then we got bored of them after like 20 podcasts or whatever. And so now I'm doing it again, and I'm figuring out how to do this in a way that can just constantly be useful to people and entertaining enough. And so that's kind of my project. And I've told myself I'm not gonna give up on this. I started doing these extra Saturday calls. I may not do those, but I'll always do this Tuesday call. And then I'll probably do like maybe a once a month one on Saturday or Sunday for people that can't do these others. Or, maybe something will change in the time or something like that. But I'm going to continue to do these regularly because I realize you have to do these regularly, and you have to just, because it takes time for people to find out that this is even out there, because there are other people who would be on this show if I could find them, if they could find me. And so if you guys could help me with that, like I was saying earlier, that would be great. That would be fantastic. If you know anybody that would participate, get on the show, whatever, I want them on here. That'd be great. So I think we're going to wind out now, and sort of this will be the last call for anyone that has a comment or question or anything like that. And let's see if I have anything in my. You know what I think we're going to do now? I think I'm going to play for you something of. I'm going to play for you something of Melissa, because I made the movie about her, melissamarimovie.com. And for a whole year, I was just going through all this material. I have so much Melissa material. So I've been kind of going back through that material and finding little clips and putting them in a folder that I can show those clips on the program here. Like we started today. I don't know if anybody was here right at 7 when we started, but I played a song, Resonate You Can't Escape. You can go back in the replay and see it. It's at the very beginning. A cool improv that Melissa did. And I got plenty of stuff. And so I'm probably every show I'll play one or two things of her. And so I've got, let's do this. Why don't we do this? I will play this, and then after it's over, I'll just, I'll say goodbye, and then we'll just move on out with this, accepting it all on the alchemical path. Accepting it all on the alchemical path. This is from 2017. It's Melissa in, out at Mill Valley. We were out at Mill Valley, her hometown. Just Melissa being wise. Okay, let us go. Let us go to that right now, and then I will see you all next Tuesday. ShadowTechAlchemy.com, SolutioPodcast.com, MelissaMariMovie.com. And if you have anything you want to share with me during the week, you want me to talk about anything, send it on over. And if you go to ShadowTechAlchemy.com, my Facebook, like towards the top, that my Facebook links, Instagram, I'm starting to use Instagram. That's there. You can join me on Facebook. So, and then just feel free when this is over to go back. If you came in late, go back and watch the replay, because we talked about the alchemical relationship and a lot of the things that we do in this type of relationship. And, great. Yes. Thank you, fellow alchemists. A wonderful and nourishing conversation. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And let us move on over to this. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to run the operation here. Okay. Here we go. So here we go. I got to put this on pause. Here we go. Bye, folks. See you later.
So I'm sitting on a redwood tree right now. This is what I did when I was a kid. I grew up in this beautiful little town called Mill Valley, California. I was very blessed in that way to grow up in this little town, in the redwoods. Probably what saved my life and also set me on the alchemical journey that I'm on. The process is challenging. When you are willing to give 100% of your consciousness to the process of going deep within one's own soul and to go into it completely, face it, and release things and integrate these things and accept all that we are is very challenging. I would say that only people that are pulled to this path will even want to listen to a video like this, because we as Westerners want everything now, everything quick, and we only want to feel good and joyful. Joy is a natural state of being, is the natural state that children always go back to, is a state of joy. But within a child's experiences is a whole range of emotions. They cry, they get mad, they get greedy. So yes, joy is a natural state that the child goes back to time and time again, because that's what gives the child natural growth, is to get back into the joy, because with the joy comes imagination and creativity and music and art. All those things that children are given naturally, that we're all given naturally. But you can't say that a child, or any human for that matter, doesn't feel the full range of human emotion throughout their life in cycles, whether that be joy, sadness, loss, the 7 deadly sins, lust and greed and envy, and all these things are just part of the human experience. And to say that we're not supposed to have that is to say that we're not supposed to be alive. This is what we are. So until we fully accept all that we are, that's including the animal nature, including the greediness, the lust, the depression, the sadness, all of it, until we fully appreciate and accept it all and allow it to be what it is. Yes, we constantly are moving back towards balance, back towards the ecstatic, back towards that imagination, because that's where we're all going, is towards the next stage, towards the next stage of evolution of ourselves, of our culture, of our community. This is a natural progression. But through that, we have to accept what is right now, what is in the moment. So this is a journey. There is no destination for this. Every time you think you've hit the destination, then you will be surprised.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week. See you next Tuesday.